everyone, welcome back to the Silly Points podcast. I'm here with Rishi and I'm Suraj, and we're going to be doing another round of the Rishi Rates on the Ashes Tour. England losing, Australia winning every match except for one of them that was drawn, and taking 4-0 the series. So again, we'll go through just like the India-South Africa. Rishi will give out his ratings for each of the players, and it's just going to be a shorter format, more digestible format. So hope you enjoy.
Yeah, I think start with England or Australia? Start with England.
Start with England, yeah.
Start with England, right? There's more interesting ratings here with England. As always, I'll just start with, I don't really have any set order. I usually do the batsmen first and then the all-rounders in the middle and then the bowlers at the end. So I'll start with Joe Root. Joe Root's a 7 out of 10. It's another series in Australia where he's not scored 100. Highlighted. He was the leading run scorer for England. He definitely, the first 3 tests, he looked pretty good, but I think by the end, just losing so many games had got into him that his batting was also starting to struggle. It didn't help that he was coming in at 2 for 10 every time. It didn't help he never had any support. His series average was still like in the 30s, so it's still not a very, very good series after what was probably a dominating year for him in 2021. I did give him an extra point for how many people stepping up as a spinner. He got like 5 wickets, I think, in the series. I think he bowled pretty well in patches for someone who's a part-timer / not a regular bowler. So I think that reflects it. I gave him an extra point on his rating. I didn't factor captaincy into his rating, which might have lost him a couple points because some of his tactics as captain were fairly poor. I think especially mainly in selection and in field settings for certain bowlers. Next is Milan. Milan's a 5 out of 10. He came into the series with a bit of promise with a really good record in the previous Ashes Tour, and it looked like a solid pick at 3 after he scored a couple of 80s in his first 3 innings. But after that, he just fell apart. I think he looked out of sorts against all types of bowling, whether it was Mitchell Stark's left arm pace, Scott Bolin's nagging accuracy from over the wicket, or Nathan Lyon's off spin. Milan didn't really provide too many answers at the back end of the series. I think it would be really disappointing for him not to convert those 80s into 100s. Might have given him more confidence, but then also he just did not look in form at all. Even when he looked good in the 5th test, he was really unlucky to be caught down leg side by Cummins on day 2. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know what Milan's future is in this test team now because this was a series he was picked for as a conditions specialist. So yeah, Ben Stokes is next. He's also a 5 out of 10. It was a pretty poor series for Ben Stokes. Definitely lost the battle of the all-rounders against Cameron Green. He is coming back after injury, and while he did look good in patches, especially in the 4 tests, he had a big hand in England not losing the series 5-0. With the bat, he didn't really. It seemed like sometimes he was batting too slow. It couldn't rotate the strike and once you get out, or sometimes be over attacking and not playing like a proper test batsman like he is known to be. His bowling was pretty poor throughout the series. He was mostly injured anyways and couldn't bowl, but when he didn't offer any control with the ball. But also, like I said, poor fields and poor tactics by having Stokes as the enforcer because England didn't want to risk Wood in the 2nd test doesn't reflect well on his bowling either. But yeah, he didn't really provide any control or wickets when needed. Next is Bairstow. Bairstow only played 2 test matches. He probably has the highest rating, I think, in the England team. It's going to be 8 out of 10. He scored a brilliant 100 and a 40 as well to help save the 4th test match. He looked really, really good. Always looked like a good player in these conditions. So we keeping, I don't think he actually kept to just rate him as a batsman. He was very, very solid, 40 plus average. Not much to say though. He only played 2 tests, and you never know if he would have been consistent or not if he had played all 5 tests. But yeah, not much to say. Zach Crawley, 5 out of 10. Again, just one innings, probably that 77 on the final day of the 4 test was very, very made Crawley look like a 100 test match player, but otherwise he looked very poor. Definitely looks like a player who averages 31 in first class cricket. Doesn't look like he's ready to play test cricket yet, but there were times, even like in the 30, I think he scored in the final innings of the series where he did look like a good player, and he probably was England's best opener, which isn't saying much, but yeah. Next up is Butler. Butler's a 3 out of 10. Probably one of the worst players of this series. Was poor with the gloves, was extremely poor with the bat. There were flashes of brilliance. I think a 30 on the first day, and then the 23 that he scored to try to save the test match before he got unluckily hit his wickets trying to retain strike. But outside of that, some like some moments of like utter nonsense, like getting caught at deep mid wicket, getting caught at cover on zero plenty of times. Just doesn't seem to really understand the flow of test match batting. And I think England have to move past him. Didn't help that he dropped a lot of catches too. I think even though he took a few stunners as well, he'd missed some really straightforward catches that you would expect someone who's regarded to be a world class keeper to take. Next up I have three batsmen who I think I'm gonna say the same thing for all. So I'm just gonna put them all together. Hamid, Burns, Popes, they all have a 2 out of 10 each. None of them scored a 50 in the series. They all played the series, got dropped, might have got picked again, but they provided no consistency at all as either in the opening slot or Pope who bats at 6. They all got out to all types of bowling. I mean, Burns was doomed from ball 1 of the series, where he got bowler on his legs, and then all the way till getting run out in the last test as well, where he didn't even put in a dive to save his wicket. Hamid's technique, which was brutally exposed by the commentators very early on, was later found out by the Australian bowlers as well with his low hands. Didn't look like a player could play in these conditions at all. Pope, meanwhile, while Pope looks good in certain aspects, he has a lot of weaknesses to his game, a lot of moving parts, weakness against good off-spin bowling like a lion. We've already seen weaknesses to off-spin before when he played Ashwin earlier in India. But yeah, all three don't really know their futures. I'm sure England will have to stick with 1 or 2 of them, but I could ever see one of them being dropped for a good amount of time. Next up is Sam Billings on debut. It looked decently good. I gave him a 6 out of 10. Looked good with the bat in the first innings. Very positive. Definitely looked better than Butler did in the 4 tests he played. But otherwise, I mean, no big score. You got to say his 2 dismissals were not the smartest bit of cricket either. One hooking a fine leg, one clipping it to mid wicket. Was very solid with the gloves. Commentators were very annoying about pointing out how much he talked, which I guess could be true. Butler was flat, but that was a bit overdone by the commentators. Classic Aussie commentators. They're some of the worst you'll see in the game. Next up is Mark Wood. Mark Wood's an 8 out of 10. And I remember thinking when I was starting to do these ratings for the 5th test, if Mark Wood really ended with an average of 36 for the series and only like 10 wickets, I think that'd be a clear example of stats not telling the true story behind how well a bowler has bowled in the series. And I'm glad. I think his 6 was great reward, and which brought his series average down to 26, but I think is a lot more realistic because Mark Wood bowled brilliantly, bowled with a lot of pace, bowled with a lot of heart. You could see in the Australian batsman's foot movement just the way they were not able to play him. They definitely suffered though from a lot of periods of bad luck, plays and assists, edges flying over the keeper, and different stuff like that. Got Labuschagne out 3 times, got Smith out a couple of times as well. So always was in the hunt with the big wickets. I think it's specific Khawaja with a bouncer on the night of the second day of the 5th test, showed how brutally quick he was. And I think a lot of fans might be thinking what would happen if they had 2 more bowlers like Wood, such as like Archer, Stone was fit. How good this bowling attack could have really been. One thing that definitely goes down Wood is at times he can offer no control to the captain and leak a lot of runs. I think a 5th test first inning showed that when England were in at the top at 3 for 12 and he leaked 30 runs in 3 overs, which shows he's not a good bowler in swinging conditions. I mean, his record in England shows that, but in these conditions, he is the best bowler England has. Next up is Stewart Broad, who's a 7 out of 10. Broad had a pretty decent series, and it didn't help that England did not pick Stewart Broad in the 2 test matches that he might have done the best for, which was the 1st and 3rd, which he pointed out as well. But his fifer, I think in the 4th test, he bowled brilliant in the 5th test as well, showed that a much improved effort from his previous tour of Australia, where he was really poor in 2017. But Broad bowled very tight, kept the wood on David Warner yet again in this series. Of course, not the same domination, bowling with a Kookaburra ball versus the Dukes in England. But yeah, Broad was still very threatening, showed a lot of heart and skill. And as he said very, very rightly, as we'll cover in the main Ashes review, it's not the bowlers can't do much of the batsman keeps getting out for 150 in non-bowling conditions. Not like these pitches were that difficult for batting. But yeah, Broad had a good series. Next up is Ollie Robinson. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna book just like I did with Hamid, Burns, and Pope. I'm gonna book Broad, Robinson, and Anderson together. They all got 7 out of 10s. I think Robinson and Anderson, same thing. Where despite a lot of pundits saying a lack of pace, I know I was pretty harsh on Robinson for this series, and I've already retracted that statement on podcasts a couple of times. But these 3 are pretty brilliant with the ball, I think. Especially if you have to look at the fact they were probably bowling on the same day because their team kept getting bowled out within 2-3 sessions only. But they all had series averages around 25 to 26, which is very respectable in flatter Australian conditions. They provided a lot. Australians batsmen range are not going to be as high as you think they would be for a 4-0 series victory. And I think Robinson, Anderson, Broad had a big factor in that. They all bowled brilliantly to both Smith, Labuschagne, and Warner, whose series slowly went down as the series progressed. I think Anderson and Robinson were pretty brilliant, and Robinson also had a couple impactful innings with the bat as well. Next up is Jack Leach. I think 5 out of 10. I think a lot of people might think I'm a bit generous for 5 out of 10 for Jack Leach. He definitely had a very poor series, but I think it's fair to say that he bowled in conditions that are very difficult for spinners. I think it's very hard I don't think finger spinners have any success in this country unless your name is Lion, Ashwin, or Jadeja. And I think his forfeit in his final day on the 4 test showed that he was willing to adapt, and he still ended up having better bowling figures and economy than Moeen did in 2017. And he also gets an extra point for his batting effort at the 4 tests. There were times he looked like a very solid night watchman and as a lower order batter, where I think we even jokingly suggested maybe he can open the batting. The last is Wokes, who's a 4 out of 10 and is probably the worst of the England bowlers. I think Wokes' bowling was probably a 2 out of 10. He gets 2 extra points for some good batting throughout the series. I think a lot of good 20s, 30s, and 40 on the second test while trying to save the match. But Wokes was very poor, and it's just like blatantly obvious he's not an overseas bowler. He's probably one of England's best with a Duke ball, but he doesn't have the skill to adapt to Australian conditions like Anderson or Robinson was able to in Australia. But Wokes was pretty torn apart, and he offered no control either with the ball. At least if you can't get wickets at a quick rate, you could be like Anderson, just choke up runs. Anderson's accounting for the series was 1.89, but Wokes was probably at 3.5 plus, and he offered no control. And this was shown in the 5th test, where in conditions even he was expected to do well and with the pink ball, he still wasn't able to provide that control for the captain or get wickets. So I do think Wokes would have been the bowler who would have been dropped if, let's say, an Archer or Stone was fit. So I think England were a little unlucky in having to pick him in the squad. But yeah, 4 out of 10. That's it for the England ratings. I'm going to move on to Australia next. So probably the first 10 out of 10 rating I'm going to give in the Rishi Rates is going to be Travis Head, 10 out of 10. Travis Head when you get 10 out of 10, that means you really didn't do anything wrong. And whenever he scored runs, whenever he had the opportunity, he scored 2 brilliant counterattacking hundreds, I think, both in the first test and in the 5th test. It missed 1 test because of COVID, but he ended up leading. He ended up getting player of the series. I think with Travis Head, like he came into the series with definitely some questions over his spot. He was dropped in the last series they played against India, but he was favored due to strong Sheffield Shield form. And he honestly, we could have thought it was Adam Gilchrist batting the way he counterattacked from both dominant positions of 300 for 5 and very difficult positions of 12 for 3 in the 5th test. So it was a really brilliant series for Travis Head. Next up is Marnus Labuschagne, who was an 8 out of 10. Started off the series very strong. Marnus ended up with an average around 45, which for Marnus standards might not be amazing, but considering how low this was, more of a low scoring series than expected, and the fact that you're not going to retain 60 plus average all the time unless you're a freak like Steve Smith. But Marnus did have a decent series. I think Mark Wood might have found his edge a couple of times, which probably lowered his average and lowered his run scoring ability. But there were times he was absolutely brilliant. Obviously, he got 100 in the 2nd test, but threw away 100 in the 1st test, but also provided a comedy goal in the 5th test where he scored a really counterattacking 40, but and provided one of the funniest dismissals we'll see in world cricket. Next up is David Warner, 6 out of 10. There were a lot of doubts about whether the new David Warner would be able to step up, but seemed a lot had gone away after a great World T20 and then also a couple of brilliant 90s in the first 2 tests. But after that, he kind of faded away. Obviously, he scored a pair in the final match, which is never a good thing. It's his 2nd pair in Test cricket, both against England now. But yeah, it was not a great series for David Warner, especially because you thought this would be the series for him to really get back in form, but his lack of runs didn't really have a big effect on Australia, especially since they were winning games so easily. And he was playing a lot more counterattacking and just really trying to have some fun. But it was not Warner would probably be disappointed to get a couple hundreds in the series. And his average was in the 30s, which is not off Warner's class, especially at home. Next up is Khawaja. Only played 2 test matches. One match I would have given a rating for 20 out of 10. So where he hit twin centuries on comeback after 2 years out of the team. So College got a 9 out of 10. He had a poor test opening, but the opening very difficult conditions at pink ball, not something he's fully used to, even though he does have a pink ball 100. But yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to see what Kawadra's future is. Is it as the opener, especially in spin heavy conditions coming up, or is he a backup middle order batter now that the spot's um fully in control by Travis Head? Next up is Steve Smith, who got a 6 out of 10. Steve Smith probably had I think this is Steve Smith's poorest Ashes ever since 2010, where he was a leg spinner trying to bat a bit. He averaged around 30-ish in the series, only a couple 50s, 190 as well. But it wasn't the best series for Steve Smith. Not that it was a big deal for Australia. It just was a mini success, or one of the mini positives for England, that they were able to restrict Steve Smith, who actually loves England and has scored probably like 10 centuries against them before the series. But yeah, it was a pretty quiet series. Steve Smith definitely threw his wicket away a couple of times. You think of him hooking a fine leg on the final day or the second last day of the series, and different times where he did look good. It did seem like times that the invincibility of Steve Smith was kind of waning off, especially now that his average is under 60. I think one big factor in me thinking this is when second test day 4, he gave 2 chances and 2 balls. He got dropped on ball 1 by Butler, and then ball 2, I think an LEW decision went in umpire's call in his favor. I don't think that Steve Smith would have ever happened to him before in the test match. So yeah. Next up is Cameron Green, who's an 8 out of 10. On bowling only, Cameron Green was a 10 out of 10. I mean, he was brilliant with the ball. Wickets, economy under 2, great control for the captain, offered a different type of attack in what's already a really amazing Australian pace attack. But Cameron Green was really, really good with the ball throughout. With a bat, he was a slowly improving figure. It's definitely started off with a lot of technical issues. Definitely got actually getting bowled in LB at the start of the series. Some technical issues that were highlighted by Crick Buzz and Ricky Ponting, which he seemed to have fixed at the latter end of the series. Definitely got a couple 50s, got a nice 70 in the 5th test, and looked very good. And he definitely has that all-rounder spot on lock now. Now that we've seen him score runs against India and taking wickets against England, we definitely seen the 2 aspects of his game. I do think he's more of a bowling all-rounder who needs to be a batting all-rounder in this Australian team to do it, because I do think Australia would like him to be more of a batsman, since they have a lot of fast bowling options, and he'll only be a 4th option ever. But he can definitely provide a lot of value with a bat, which is more of which is on their weaker side in their department right now. I do think his batting can be a little, even though he has series average around 35, I think that might be a little generous. He definitely had a couple of declaration innings, where there was nearly no pressure, and he just had to go have a little bit of fun. But the 70 at the last test especially had me increase his rating, because it did show his technical issues might be able to fix them a little bit. And I know he put a lot of work on it in his game before the 4th or 3rd test. Next up is Alex Carey, 4 out of 10. Carey had a pretty poor series, only 150. Had a lot of chances too with the bat. Definitely and then he wasn't clean with the gloves either. Definitely dropped a few catches more than he would have liked. It's not the brightest of starts for Carey on his test debut, and definitely means that the door is not locked on Tim Paine if he wants to make a comeback, because I do think Tim Paine is a better keeper and a better batsman than Alex Carey right now. I think one thing that needs to be said is this might not have been a good time for Alex Carey to make his test debut. He did average 15 in the Sheffield Shield before the series, which is why I didn't think Carey was a great option. There's also options like Josh Inglis in the backup for Australia. So Josh Inglis' spot has definitely not gone down after the series Carey has shown. And just based on the way Carey played, just the spin of Joe Root makes you a little worried of whether he can even score against, proper spinners bowling in their backyards in the coming series for Australia. So yeah, I think this series did more benefit to Tim Paine actually than Alex Carey, because I don't think he solidified his spot as well at all. Next up is Marcus Harris, who was probably the only Australian batsman to be dropped from the team, and that's due to poor form of runs. So he got a 5 out of 10. He did look a lot better as the series progressed, did play a lot of balls, got stuck into a good English new ball attack, and did get a solid 70 in the 3rd test. But I think the fact is Harris has now played like 15, 16 test matches and has not got 100 yet, and he only has 3 450s. So it might be possible that maybe he's not ready for test cricket yet. and needs to just go back to the Shield. He's done well in the Shield. Obviously, he's a dominant player there, but maybe he just needs a couple more seasons. Maybe he needs to go play county cricket, something like that, to like step up his game. But I doubt we'll be seeing him opening the next test for Australia. But I do think he's still a very talented batsman who definitely does have a future in the team. Next up is now we're just gonna have a whole bunch of high positive ratings. We're gonna have the Australian bowlers. So Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, Nathan Lyon, they all got 9 out of 10s. I mean, like all of them, I think had around the same average. They all were in the top wicket list. Starc was especially more brilliant because Starc was probably my pick for the Man series because he also provided a lot of good runs for Australia, batting around like 40-ish, batting around average around 40, I think, at the end of the series. Cummins was brilliant with the ball. He didn't really ever have a bad spell, I think, in this series. Nathan Lyon, while not even needed in the 5th test, was brilliant with the ball. I think Cummins we knew would have a great series. Starc and Lyon, there's a little bit of talks about their format, especially after a very poor India series. But I think Starc from ball 1 and Lyon from after he got his 400 test wicket in the 1st test, they both just showed why they've been in this Australian team for 6-7 years. You can't just count them out after one bad series. They're amazing players there, and they showed their brilliance throughout the series. There's not much to say though. I think it's going to be a big year for Australian Test cricket, especially for Nathan Lyon, as he's going to be very crucial in the subcontinent tours coming up. Next up is Scott Bolin, who also gets a 10 out of 10 because how can you not give him a 10 out of 10? He averaged under 10 in the series. A crazy economy at times. He looked to be the most difficult bowler in the series. It seemed like England were more content facing Starc or Cummins versus Scott Bolin, which is crazy. If you had told me 2 months ago that this guy would be playing Test cricket, I would have been like, I literally would have blinked my eyes like 3 times. Like, who is that? Because I mean, I do remember who he is, but I didn't think he was even in the frame for an Australian call-up. But he got a little bit of a lucky debut playing. No, actually, he didn't get a lucky debut. He got picked in the MCG. I was mixing up with the 2nd test when Neser came in for Cummins, but he did get a good break where they picked him as an MCG specialist, and then he tore England apart in that 2nd innings with a 6-for. And then there were times where they didn't even score a run off him in like 4, 5, 6 over spells. And yeah, he was a perfect replacement for the injured Josh Hazlewood, even though a little bit slower. He provides a lot of excellent control. Don't know his future in the Test team, to be honest. Still don't think he definitely is not. He definitely hasn't stepped ahead of the main 3 fast bowlers. I don't even know if he'll be useful in conditions outside of Australia, England, South Africa, stuff where ball seems a lot more. But obviously you never know, right? And he should definitely be looked up in the extended squad, and definitely someone who hopefully gets fewer matches. He is on the elder. He doesn't have a huge future considering his age, but it was pretty nice to see him succeed. Next up is the next 3 guys we're talking about all played 1 test match each. So 3 fast bowlers: Richardson, Neser, Hazlewood. Richardson and Hazlewood both 8 out of 10s. Richardson got a 5 for in the only test he played. Got to give him a high rating. Hazlewood was brilliant in the 3 wickets he got in the 1st test. I think, but he really annoyed to have gotten injured in the series. They could have seen Hazlewood getting like 15, 16, 17 plus wickets in this series easily. He has a very good record at home, very good record against England. He's a world-class bowler. Neser got 6 out of 10. He wasn't super effective in the test match he played. He did get 3 wickets. It was pretty good to see the dude who always has to carry the drinks for the Australian team get a debut. Didn't look bad, of course. Provides a lot of control, but I do think Scott Bolin might have gone ahead of him in the rankings for Australia, and after he had such a great series, and it is unlucky that he didn't get to play a consecutive test match, both him and Richardson. But that's just the truth. The truth is Bolin, Richardson, Neser all got 1 test, but Bolin took it by the absolute heart, taking that 6 for. Richardson also did get a 5 for, and I do think Richardson has a long future for Australia, especially if they want to keep rotating their fast bowlers a bit more. So yeah, that's it. That's it for the ratings. My God, I talked so much.
How long was that? 15 minutes ish?
Yeah, 15 minutes. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Just as a summary, who was your best English batsman? I think that's kind of obvious.
Bairstow got an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Root, out of the ones that actually played all matches or more matches, Root got a 7 out of 10.
Awesome. And best bowler from England?
Wood, 8 out of 10. But Broad, Robinson, Anderson all got 7s.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And
yeah,
then,
when you look at the England bowling, actually, only 2 guys actually got a bad rating. And one was a spinner and one was Wokes. So
right.
Not even a bad series for England with the ball based on my
Yeah, I mean that's pretty indicative of the bowling for England, right? It just the issue was just batting for England,
right.
which yeah.
And I think
And then
those ratings could have gone even higher up if they were picked in the right conditions too.
exactly.
Think of Anderson with the pink ball in the final match. Think of
Yeah,
Broad
those
at
are
the Gabba.
prime English conditions in the fifth
Yeah,
match at Hobart. So
Broad at the Gabba with green pitch in England, winning the toss
yeah,
and choosing the bowl first instead of batting. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Same thing for Australia. Best batsman, best bowler.
yeah. So Head got a 10 out of 10. Bolin got a 10 out of 10. I mean,
Solid.
they didn't do anything wrong, so it was hard to find a reason to make them lose a point. I try to reserve 10 out of 10s for really special series. But I just thought there's no way I could take a mark out of them because 10 out of 10, I was thinking would be like a Mitchell Johnson 2013 Ashes,
Mm.
but like no one's really gonna do that type of series,
Yeah.
like a Steve Smith 2019, something like that. But I was like, I
Mhm.
can be a little more lenient with it.
Solid. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. If you'd want a more in-depth version of this, we'll be posting an Ashes like full review. You can go and check that out as well. Let us know. Keep letting us know if this Rishi Rates is something you enjoy. And yeah, we'll continue doing them for the following series. Yeah, thanks everyone.